Good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Pen Vicarage on this Wednesday morning. Well, my friends, it's snowing outside, which means, alas, the golf course is shut this morning. Never mind, God is good, it's good to be alive, and worse things could happen at sea. Speaking of which brings us neatly onto our psalm for today. You'll see why in a moment. Psalm 55. It's quite a long one, it's about 25 verses long, so make yourself comfortable. And here we go, Psalm 55. Give ear to my prayer, O God. Do not hide yourself from my supplication. Attend to me and answer me. I am troubled in my complaint. I am distraught by the noise of the enemy, because of the clamour of the wicked. For they bring trouble upon me, and in anger they cherish enmity against me. My heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling come upon me, and horror overwhelms me. And I say, oh, that I had wings like a dove. I'd fly away and be at rest. Truly I would flee far away. I would lodge in the wilderness. I would hurry to find a shelter for myself from the raging wind and tempest. Confuse, O Lord, confound their speech, for I see violence and strife in the city. Day and night they go around it on its walls. And iniquity and trouble are within it. Ruin is in its midst. Oppression and fraud do not depart from its marketplace. It's not enemies who taught me. I could bear that. It's not adversaries who deal insolent with me. I could hide from them. But it's you, my equal, my companion, my familiar friend, with whom I kept pleasant company. We walked in the house of God with the throng. Let death come upon them. Let them go down alive to Sheol, for evil is in their homes and in their hearts. But I will call upon God, and the Lord will save me. Evening and morning and noon, I'll utter my complaint and moan, and he will hear my voice. He will redeem me unharmed from the battle that I wage, for many are arrayed against me. God, who's enthroned from of old, will hear and will humble them, because they do not change and do not fear God. My companion lay hands on a friend and violated a covenant with me. With speech smoother than butter and with a heart set on war, his words were softer than oil, but in fact they were drawn swords. Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. He will never permit the righteous to be moved. But you, O God, will cast them down into the lowest pit. The bloodthirsty and treacherous shall not live out half their days, but I will trust in you. And this is the word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Well, there are kind of three sections to this psalm. There is verses 1 to, verse 1 to 15, which is David laying out his situation before God. Then in verse 16, there's a big change. He calls upon God, and then he starts expressing a confidence after that. And then finally, there's a bit of teaching in verse 22, which tells people the famous words, cast your burden on the Lord. Okay, so there's three sections in there. There's the laying out the situation. There's come before God and finds confidence in God. And there's a bit of kind of teaching for everybody else thrown in there as well. And there's two kind of famous verses in there. Fly wings like a dove, that's verse 6. Don't worry, I shan't break into song. Oh, for the wings of a dove. And of course, as I say, the other famous verse is verse 22. Cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. Two very, very famous verses. But let's go into the psalm in a bit more depth now for a moment. One of the many wonderful things about the Psalms is that in them is every kind of emotion you could ever imagine. You know, there's happiness, there's sadness, there's joy, there's praise, and everything. And here in Psalm 55, we have David here in real despair. And I think for many people, it's an experience that we all have at some point in our lives, utter kind of desperation, desolation. We do not know the situation David's in. We can speculate as much as we like. But at the end of the day, it doesn't actually say. The last two Psalms, Psalm 52 and 54, did actually say what the situation was. Psalm 55 doesn't. So it could apply to any of us here. But in here, we have really strong expressions. And as I say, feelings which I'm sure we've all experienced at some point in our lives. Firstly, a sense of kind of desperation here. Here he is utterly desolate. You know, he's distraught, he says in verse 2. And my heart is in anguish within me. The terrors of death have fallen upon me. Fear and trembling have come upon me, and horror overwhelms me. And I think there's a lot of talk these days, quite rightly, about the issue of mental health and desperation and depression and so on and so on and so on. And I think here in this psalm, we have David encountering real desolation here. It's a really bad way. he's feeling seriously hemmed in. And words like moaning, and these are heartfelt words. He clearly feels in a really, really bad way. And as I say, it's a feeling which many people feel at some point in their lives. Most of us do, I think. That's the first thing. But there are some extra things in here which kind of add a bit of nuance to it as well. Firstly, a sense in which he feels as though he's been hidden from God. He says, do not hide yourself to God. Do not hide yourself from my supplication. We can feel sometimes like the disciples did in the boat, that Jesus has fallen asleep and we're on our own. And sometimes we can feel in our lives, where's God in all this? And we can feel that. And I guess here we have David, do not hide yourself. A sense in which he feels as though God's hidden from him somehow. So if you're feeling like that, then in a sense David's been there too. And of course we have the famous words on Jesus on the cross, which is Psalm 22 as well. My God, why have you abandoned me? So as well as the anguish that David's feeling, he's also feeling here as though somehow God's hidden from him. Again, a feeling which many of us feel in our lives at some point. Then he talks about a sense in which he wants to escape. So all these things are going on, and he just wants to kind of run away. And he hints the famous, "Oh, for the wings, I'd wings like a dove, I'd fly away and be at ease." As though somehow he feels that he wishes he could just run away. I suppose the modern equivalent would be, go hide under the duvet somewhere, put your head down and hide under the duvet and just kind of run away from it all. And it's tempting sometimes to want to kind of run away from our problems. But here we have David experiencing that desire to run away. There's a guy called Elijah in the Old Testament as well, who, amazing guy of faith, he took on 400 prophets of Baal and won. And then Jezebel threatened him and he basically runs away and has some kind of a breakdown. So the feeling of wanting to kind of run away because things are difficult is a feeling which David had, which Elijah had. Great men of God had that as well. So please don't feel as though you're on your own. And also the sense of betrayal. David here has clearly been betrayed. Now I'm pretty sure he's not talking about Doeg the Edomite or the Ziphites, because I don't think he'd call any of them bosom friends. But here we have, somebody who David's feeling a great sense of betrayal by someone that's very close to him, that someone's really let him down very badly. And of course, that's what Jesus felt by Judas when Judas betrayed him at the Last Supper and so on. As well as the fact that the pain and everything of what Jesus went through, the pain of being betrayed by one of your close friends was very, very difficult for Jesus too, and a huge part of the passion of Jesus. It's also worth remembering, however, before we get too hoity-toity about David and about Judas and all the others, is that let's not forget that only 3 Psalms ago we talked about Psalm 51, which reminded us of the time when David betrayed one of his friends. So here we have David feeling betrayed by his friends. But let's not forget that what David did when he Bathsheba and Uriah the Hittite and so on, that he actually betrayed one of his friends too. So let's make sure that what we do in our lives does not betray God. Let's make sure that, whilst we don't want to get betrayed ourselves, let's make sure that we don't betray God and betray other people too. So that's David. He lays out the situation before God. Then he comes before God in verse 16, and there's a huge change there. He knows he'll come before God. He comes before God morning, evening, and at night time as well. And he, at all times and in all places, he brings the situation to God. And he knows that, and he expresses such confidence that by coming before God all these times, God will make things better, that God will be with him, and God will put things right. Which is why it's important for us, actually, to keep praying morning, afternoon, and night, all times, to pray to God and bring our situation before God. As they used to say, any time, any place, anywhere. But he's constantly bringing his prayer to God, and things will improve. And then finally, the teaching, which it says, this is David's experience, so he says to us all, cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. And that's what we can do when things get hem us in, like do with David, that we can actually cast our burdens on the Lord. So, into kind of summation, really. Here we have David. We don't know the situation he's in, but we do know that he's feeling really hemmed in. He feels, like many of us do, at times, a huge sense of utter desperation here. The situation seems hopeless. Okay. As well as that, he feels as though God's hidden from him. And again, a thing we can all experience in our lives. He also feels a desire sometimes to run away. like wings of a dove to be able to run away. Like we all feel sometimes the temptation may be to hide under the duvet or run away from our problems or whatever. Again, David felt that too. And also a sense of betrayed by his friends. Right? He'd been let down by someone very close to him, as Jesus did. But also there's a message to us also, and to David too, to make sure we don't like being betrayed ourselves, to make sure we don't betray other people, as he did with Uriah the Hittite years later. So he brings this situation before God, feelings, as I say, which we all encounter at times, despair, a sense of God's a long way from us, a feeling of betrayal, feeling of we want to run away. And like he brings this all before God. And after he knows that having brought it before God, and he continues to do so, that God will help him, God will honour him, and God will put things right. The message overall being for us, my friends, when we encounter difficulties, cast your burden on the Lord, and he will sustain you. And I think that's a good message for today. Bless you, my friends. Have a lovely day, and Psalm 56 tomorrow.